What up, lovely people? Batman v Superman is coming around the corner, and as I promised, I said I would give my spoiler review of Man of Steel because I did a spoiler-free review of Man of Steel, but it's a couple years later, and I thought I'd give an in-depth review of what I liked and what I didn't like about Man of Steel. So, without further ado, here's a flashback review of Man of Steel. To be clear from the get-go, my thoughts on this movie have changed since the first time I saw it in theaters. I've watched this movie plenty of times and my thoughts are a little bit different, you know? However, what hasn't changed is, when I was growing up, I wasn't really a big fan of Superman. I do think Superman is a bit overrated, but I do like the mythology of Superman and who he is as a person. And I'll admit, I still have not seen any of the old original Superman movies, so this is the this Man of Steel movie, this is all I have. So I probably will see him at some point, but this is what I got for right now. So Man of Steel it's about the Superman dude. And so Man of Steel, it is directed by Zack Snyder, who has given us such classics as 300, Watchmen, and this shit here, Sucker Punch. And then after that, he gave us Man of Steel. Now, most of y'all remember that at the time when Man of Steel came out, it was a very, very, very divisive film. And either you love it or you hate it, either you roll with it or you're just not going to roll with it. And some of the negatives is solely on Zack Snyder and his vision of this movie. But this movie here is more so of an origin story, and it starts on Krypton, which I loved, by the way. I remember I saw this in theaters, I was just blown away. And it's not like some ice world like it was in the original Superman movies. It's just this stone-like world, and it opens up with Kal-El's mom, Clark Kent, Superman. His mother, Kal-El, he is the first natural-born Kryptonian because his father, Jor-El, he believes that pretty much he's the one that could pretty much save everything. But nonetheless, the reason it's all on Kal-El because Krypton, it is dying. Its core is collapsing, and so everyone is pretty much dead at this point. But Jor-El, he put the Codex into Kal-El so that he could survive on Krypton and Earth. But then General Zod, he comes in, he's not having it because, he thinks that all the leaders of Krypton, they pretty much doomed this planet, and so General Zod, he comes in to punish them and kill everyone, but Jor-El, he's not having it. So, and then I just love that one shot, it's just all hell breaks loose, and Jor-El, he's trying to escape General Zod and get back to Kal-El so that he can send him to Earth. And I just like that little bit right there where they have to say goodbye to Kal. They're never going to see them again, and they all are going to inevitably die. But then General Zod, he comes in, and there's a brief fight between Jor-El and General Zod, and I even feel for Laura. And then she's struggling for a little bit, but she knows what she has to do, and then she sends him, and Kal-El, he goes up in the air, and then General Zod, he's like, no! And then out of anger, General Zod, he actually kills Jor-El. Now, granted, they're all going to die anyways, but it's the fact that General Zod, he killed them, it just makes it all personal. You see General Zod's intentions and the type of person he is and his motivations. And it just makes General Zod all villainy. So General Zod, they're about to blow the ship that Kal-El is in, but then the Krypton leaders, they're able to get him, and they banish General Zod and his team to the Phantom Zone. And I just like that one bit right there where General Zod, he's like, you won't kill us yourself! You'll damn us to a black hole! Jor-El was right. You're a pack of fools. Every last one of you. And you. You think your son is safe? I will find him. I will find him. I will find him! And then of course they actually get banished to the Phantom Zone in what people were calling the penis pods, and I know numerous times people have called those pods the penis pods, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to still say it. They get taken in the penis pod. And so Krypton, it finally dies, it blows up, and then we see Kal-El's ship, he finally gets to Earth, and then White Wind is about to crash. We cut to Kal-El as an adult years later, which I actually like, though when I first saw it I thought it was a little bit choppy, but it actually works. Because as we keep cutting from Kal-El to an adult to Kal-El as a child, it's pretty much just a relevant of things that happen. And we see how much Kal-El, he got messed with at this point his name is Clark Kent, but we see how much Clark Kent got messed with as a kid. And we just see that one little We see that one scene of him, he's in a classroom in elementary school, and then all his sisters are starting to come to him, and he locks himself in a closet. And then he's on that school bus, and then the bus crashes into the ocean, and he had to save them, or else they're all going to die. And then all the kids see him, and then that one mother, she's all concerned, saying that this is an act of God, and that Clark Kent, he is different, and he is not of here. And then we see Mom and Pa Kent, played by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. I'll get to more on them later. But then this is one of the things that everyone had a problem with, because, you know, he's getting on Clark talking about, son, you can't be doing this. The world will know about this. And then Clark Kent's like, what am I supposed to do? Just let him die? And then Clark Kent's like, maybe. Now, at that point, everyone has a problem with that. So you're pretty much saying Clark Kent saving anyone? No, that everyone took that the wrong way. That is not what he's saying. Pretty much what he's saying is like, we don't know what we would actually do once we were put into that situation. But since they weren't really in that situation, it's more easier for them to just say, just let him die, than actually what they would actually do if they were in the situation. But nonetheless, Pa Kent, he takes him to that pod that he arrived in Earth in, and then he pretty much tells him, look, whoever you are, you're going to change the world, but you are not of here, and you got to figure it out yourself. And hopefully this will help. He gives him that little stone with the S on it that stands for hope, and it's really S. I just like that little one bit right there where Clark Kent, he's like, but can I just keep pretending to be your son? And then Clark Kent's like, you are my son. Now let's talk about some of the cast real quick. Like Henry Cavill as Clark Kent / Kal-El. He is perfect in this role. He looks the part. He's all jacked, and he really did a good job of portraying like the human side of Clark Kent versus like the alien side of him. He's just this person. He's conflicted with himself. He can't find his place in the world, and he's trying to find his place in the world. He works as Superman in this movie, and I cannot wait to see what he does as Superman in Batman v Superman and in any other future DC Cinematic Universe movies. Kevin Costner, he worked perfectly in this movie. He did a good job of just playing like, you know, this father figure that's just trying to protect his son and really had the best intentions for him. Really, between those three characters, the only character that I was not necessarily skeptical, but like, you couldn't pick someone else with, was just Diane Lane as Ma Kent, because I'm just saying, look, and don't get me wrong, Diane Lane, she was great as Ma Kent in this movie. I'm just saying, it's just, when I first saw this movie, I didn't buy Diane Lane as an old woman in this movie because Diane Lane, alright? It's just, like, I know she's significantly old, but it's like, she ain't bad looking either, so it's like, I don't care how much y'all de-age, right? But nonetheless, Diane Lane, she was great in this movie. Like, she did a good job playing off of Pa Kent in this movie, and, you know, she's that concerned mother, and she wants the best for her son. And then there's this little bit in the movie where later on, where after Clark Kent, he finds his real father, and she's all concerned because it's like, you're gonna forget about me or whatever. And then Clark, he's like, no, I would never forget about you. You'll always be my mother. And after watching this movie a couple of years later, I'm like, I buy her more as Martha Kent, so yeah, why not? And then, of course, between all the flashbacks, we cut to Clark Kent as an adult, and, you know, at first we see him as Whitehorn, we see him on that ship, and then that oil rig blows up, and then he goes to save them, and then Aquaman anyone. And then he works at that bar, and then, you know, we see him, he's still struggling a little bit, and then that drunk dude at the bar, he's messing with him a little bit, and then he throws a cup at him, and then we see Clark Kent, he's struggling. He really could have taken him out, but, you know, he took back a little more for himself, but then he went out, and then he ruined that guy's truck. And then later on, he goes to the Arctic, where they find this probe in this glacier, and Clark Kent, he has to go to it. And then during that whole segment, we meet Lois Lane, who's played by Amy Adams, which I loved. She's a reporter, she's investigating this, and then she sees Clark Kent going after it, and then he finds the probe, but then she eventually encounters the probe, but then he gets hurt, but then he saves her. And then I just like when she's on the ground and she's bleeding internally, and then Clark Kent, he has to use his heat vision to pretty much heal her. He's like, you're bleeding eternally. I can do things other people can't. And then his eyes start lining up, and then she sees him, she starts screaming, she starts freaking out. But then she wakes up the next day to safety. And speaking of the heat vision, one of the little details I love about this movie is how Clark Kent handles everything. You know, he's still getting used to the heat vision, but then after he's like, ooh, that hurt. And later on, he still has a little stone with the S on it. He plugs it in, and he sees the hologram of his father, and he sees the hologram of his father, and then he tells him how important he is, and how much he means to Earth and Krypton, and that he can embody the best of both worlds, and then, hey, here's your super suit here. Which, I will admit, even though it was good, but at the same time, I felt it was kind of rushed. I would probably have expected more of a more bigger reaction from Cal. Like, you're my father? Like, who? What? Where? Why? Like, why did you leave me here? Like, what the hell, Dad? And then he just gave him his super soon, like, what is this? Just saying, like, they feel like they kind of rushed through that a little bit. But in any case, so he puts on the super suit, and I just love when the first time he flies, he puts on the suit, he flies for a little bit, and then, he's struggling with a little bit, and that's another detail I like, because, you don't expect him to just put on the super suit and just fly out of nowhere like he's done it before, but no, in this movie, he's like, holy shit, I can fly! Then he stops for a little bit, but then he finally finds his footing, and then he just starts flying everywhere. He flies through the glaciers, he flies through that fields, and he flies up into space. Jumping back to Lois Lane, after that whole first encounter, she writes a brief report on him, saying that she doesn't know who he is, and then he gives it to Perry White, played by Lawrence Fishburne, but he denies it, and so she leaks it, but then she does a little bit more investigation, and then she eventually goes back to Smallville, where she meets Martha Kent, and then this leads her to Clark Kent, and then Clark Kent, who finds out about this, like, why are you following me? But she's like, why are you doing this? Why don't you share your story with the world? But then Clark Kent, he's like, I can't share my story with the world. But the reason why is because I like how he's standing over Pa Kent's grave. And this is where I felt like the flashbacks worked most effectively, because she's asking, why won't you want to share your story with the world? But then we cut back to when Pa Kent actually died. He's like, they're all in the truck, and then he's all talking about, you're not my dad. And then Pa Kent's like, I understand. And then they all starting to make up with each other, but then a tornado comes, and then they're overpassed, but they leave the dog in the truck, but then Pa Kent, he tries to go back in to save the dog, and he eventually gets the dog out, but then he gets stuck, and then Clark Kent, he sees this, he knows he could have saved him, and the tornado's coming right near them, but then Pa Kent, he's like, nah. And I just like that little emotional moment where he just stands there and is like, just let me do this. And then the tornado comes and it kills Pa Kent, and then Clark Kent and his mother, they're like, Dad! I just love that little emotional moment, which is another thing that most friends didn't really agree with, but at the same time I understand why they did it. Because at the end of the flashback, this is where I felt like the flashback worked most. This is where, like, my dad died because I trusted him, because he was convinced that the world wasn't ready for me. Pretty much Pa Kent, he died trying to protect his son because he really was convinced that the world wasn't ready for him to see what he could actually do yet. And that's one of the things I love about Kevin Costner as Pa Kent. Like, he really loves his son, that he is willing to die just to protect his son from the world. Now, the controversy about this scene is because we all know the usual lore of Pa Kent dying is just of a heart attack, which I can definitely understand, because it's like, of all the things Superman can do, he can't save everything. He can't save everyone. And a simple heart attack coming to his father can make Superman feel so little. But you can't deny of what they accomplished with this death scene in Man of Steel, though. The cut back to Lois Lane, understanding why he doesn't want his story out to the world, and realizing what his father died for, she was like, oh, well, no, I can't do that. But nonetheless, Perry White, he's proud of her for doing that, though. And again, that's one of the things I loved about Amy Adams as Lois Lane, and why I think this relationship between the two of them worked, because Amy Adams, she's now on Clark Kent's side, and, she's pretty much didn't spill the beans out to the world. It shows good character development for Lois Lane. So now, enter Act 2 of this movie, in which General Zod and his crew, they are all back, and they have come to look for Kal-El on Earth. He comes in doing this little message thing on all the TVs talking about, you have one of my people, Kal-El. He may look like you, but he is not of you. Please surrender him to me. If not, I will destroy this planet. And now the government and all the soldiers and all, they're all looking for him, and they even get to Lois Lane, asking him to know where he is. But then eventually, Kal-El, Clark Kent, he eventually surrenders himself. And I like that one little part with Lois Lane, she's all like, why are you surrendering to him? But then Clark Kent, he's like, I'm not surrendering to you. I'm surrendering to mankind. There's a difference. I'm like, yep. And so the two of them, they eventually meet General Zod. And we see Clark Kent, he is not responding well to the Krypton atmosphere, and then, he starts coughing up blood, and then he starts becoming weak and starts coughing up blood, but then he's having an illusion with General Zod, and then he's telling them our planet couldn't survive, so now we need to find a new one. And he pretty much tells them all his story and what happened and that General Zod's intentions. Now, real quick, let's talk about Michael Shannon as General Zod. Now, I actually do love him as General Zod. I thought this worked in. Like, to me, the most terrifying villains are the ones that are so convinced that what they're doing is the right thing that they'll do pretty much anything to do it. And even General Zod, he even mentions it later on at the end of the movie. I exist solely to protect Krypton. What action I take, no matter how cruel or violent it is for the purpose of my people. And to me, that is how Michael Shannon works as General Zod in this movie. It's just he is so cruel and violent and do anything for Krypton, even destroying the entire planet of Earth. So Clark Kent and Lois Lane, they eventually escape with the help of the Jor-El hologram. And so they get back to the Earth, and it's that throwdown with Smallville, which I love. I love that action sequence right there, and I just like it when they get to Martha Kent's house, and they look for the probe that he arrived in when he was a baby. And then, they throwing her around. She's like, where is it? But then Clark Kent, he comes in, he's like, don't mess with my mother! I remember when I saw that in theaters, I was like, yeah, get him, Superman, get him! And again, they're throwing down in Smallville, in which we have one of the most blatant product placements since the Transformers movie. They're going through that IHOP in that Subway and gas station, like, what the hell? Like, it was not so obvious. But I like that little bit where they're in the IHOP and he embraces the kid that picked on him when he was a kid. It was like, what's up? And he's throwing down with that girl, I forgot her name, but she's a real wordsmith and she's really letting him have it. And I just like that little... I just love that little fight. It was very action-packed, and what I liked about the scene, because it's like, as well as all the other action in the movie, because it's like, it was fun and cool to see Superman do stuff we weren't able to see him do in a movie, because, you also got to think, the older movies, they came out so long ago that the technology wasn't there to do the stuff he does in this movie. Then when we did have the technology to do the stuff that he does in this movie, they made Superman fly an island up into space. So that's one of the things I appreciate Zack Snyder in this movie for. And then, of course, we also got to talk about the dark tone in this movie. Now, one of the most notable things about this movie is this movie was produced by Christopher Nolan, and there was not one moment in this movie where I felt like Christopher Nolan did that. Though the dark tone does feel like a Christopher Nolan movie, but it wasn't. It was just Christopher Nolan giving some of his intake, making sure this movie is on the right track. And I appreciate the dark tone of this movie because, again, the older movies came out so long ago and it was just so campy that you kind of have to switch it up a little bit, And you also got to understand this isn't your grandfather's Superman. This is the Superman for this generation. Though I do understand, because it's like, Superman, he's not really a dark person. He's supposed to give people hope, and I understand that, but you also got to think, Superman, he's about to share a universe with a whole bunch of other Supermans, preferably Batman, who is nothing but a dark character. And especially since you want to separate yourself from the fun aspect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you kind of have to have a different tone. But by the end of the fight ends, and the soldiers are on their side. They believe that Superman, that he is a good person, and that he means to stop General Zod. And so General Zod, he finds out that the codex to bring Krypton back to life is within Kal-El, and then he's all like, "Does Kal-El need to be alive to get it?" And then they're like, "No." And so they get those two ships, one on one side of the Earth, in Metropolis, and then the other one on the other side of the Earth, and they activate it, and then it just starts pretty much they're changing the Earth's atmosphere into Kryptonian's atmosphere. Pretty much they're turning Earth into Krypton. And so Superman, he gets with Lois Lane and the others, they figured out how to stop this. And again, this is one of the things I felt they could have held back a little bit. And pretty much everyone has said this, but it's when Superman, he's fighting those little tentacles. But at the same time, I do like it because it's like Superman, he defeats the tentacles, but he goes under that little probe to destroy it, and then he's struggling because again, it's Kryptonian, and he's struggling. He doesn't sync well with it, but then he's struggling, and then he has to go through and he's able to destroy it, and therefore stopping the other one. And so Lois Lane and those other soldiers, they get to the other one so that they can destroy it, and so they do. Now, another controversial thing about this movie is the destruction of Metropolis. And people complain about Superman didn't save anyone. I'm like, well, you also got to think. Superman, he's already occupied trying to stop General Zod from turning Earth into Krypton. So, what's more important? Well, people's lives are more important, but at the same time, it's like, you got to compromise a little bit. What's more important? People's lives at the moment, or saving the Earth so that you can have a planet to live in? And this complaint also falls into the final fight with General Zod. And, again, we see General Zod. He is pissed. He's like, I exist solely to protect Krypton. That is what you have taken from me. I'm going to destroy Earth. You're a monster, Zod. And so the two of them, they all just start fighting each other, Dragon Ball Z style. They just punching each other, throwing each other through buildings. They letting each other have it. And then we even get a DC Cinematic Universe reference with that gas tank. It has LexCorp on it, and then Superman German Zod, he throws that tank at Superman, but then he dodges it and it just blows up. And they're fighting each other, and I like the little scene where German Zod, because ever since German Zod came to Earth, he's having a problem trying to conquer his senses. But remember, he is a general, he's a soldier, so he learns to adapt to these things. And I just like the little part where he's like, I was bred to be a warrior, Cal. Trained my entire life to counter my senses. Where did you train? On a farm? And then he just lets all that armor off him, and then he's really free to like give it to Superman. And again, they just continue. They just fighting each other, letting each other have it. They throw each other through buildings, punching each other, and they eventually end up in space with that little probe with the Wayne Tech logo on it. And again, people tend to complain because between the two of them, the destruction of Krypton, and they're not saving everyone. Again, he's trying to destroy someone who's trying to destroy Krypton. So Superman, he's already preoccupied. So he can't really juggle too many things at once. And then there's the icing on the cake, which again, people also complain about. The two of them, they get back to ground level, and then Superman, he has the upper hand, and then General Zod, he sees his family, and then General Zod, he's like, if you love these people so much, you can mourn from them. And then he just starts letting the heat vision out, and is going towards that family. And Superman, he has him in the chokehold, and he just keeps telling him, don't do this, please, stop. And General Zod, he's like, never. And then Superman, he has no choice because that heat vision is going towards the family, and then he just has no choice. And he snaps General Zod's neck, and then boom, General Zod, he's dead. Now the reason this scene is particularly controversial because it's like Superman doesn't kill anyone. Oh well, let's talk about this. General Zod, he had heat vision out, and he was about to go towards that family. So it was either General Zod dies or General Zod kills that family. So let's pick. Do you want the death of a family on your hands, or and I do understand, it was General Zod, he was the last living Kryptonian, and now Kal-El, he is the last of the Kryptons. Which is why I like the scene, because after he killed General Zod, he didn't just be like, yeah, take that. I just like the little part where Kal-El, he drops to the ground and he just starts yelling like, no! And then Lois Lane, she comes to his end and she hugs him. But again, I understand Superman doesn't die, but given certain circumstances, you're gonna have to kill. And if Superman just let that family die, would have been like, no. And now we're down to the last three scenes of this movie. To me, which the last three scenes of the movie I think is the icing on the cake. Is when Superman, he crashes that drone onto the ground, and then that soldier played by Henry Lennox, he's like, are you even stupid? That's a $1,000 piece of equipment right there. And then Clark Kent, he's like, I know you're trying to figure out where you hang my cape. You won't find me. Then I'll ask the obvious question. How do I know you won't act against our American forces? And then I like this little funny moment right here. It's like, Clark Kent is like, I grew up in Kansas, General. I'm about as American as it gets. And then pretty much they're just like, you're just going to have to convince the government that I'm on your side. And then Henry Lennox is like, even if I were willing to try, what makes you think I can convince the government? And then Superman, he's like, I don't know, General. I guess you're just going to have to trust me. And then finally we see Clark Kent and Martha Kent. They're at Paul Kent's grave, and I just like the little scene right there, which I think is, again, the icing on the cake and the wrap up to the whole flashback segment. Because after everything Clark Kent, he has accomplished, and he finally figured out who he is. And then we see that flashback of Clark Kent, he's out in the field playing with the dog, and he has the cape on, and Martha and Paul Kent, they're seeing him, and then Martha, she's reflecting and talking about, oh, he saw it, Clark, he saw it because he asked, I wish my father would have seen me being able to find my footing. But then she says, don't worry, he saw it. And then we just cut to that scene of Clark Kent playing in the field, and he has the cape on, pretty much symbolism saying that he's going to be someone great one day. And then she asks, so what are you going to do now? And then he's like, I'm going to get a job where I can keep my ear to the ground, where people won't look twice if I go missing, looking out for danger. And then he gets a job at the Daily Planet where Lois Lane works, and which I also love because, she knows who Superman is, she knows who Clark Kent is, It's one of the things I do not like about, well, I won't say don't like about Superman, it's one of the things I don't understand about Superman. Because you cannot tell me that people, and let alone Lois Lane, cannot tell Clark Kent from Superman. So it was nice that they had Lois Lane actually know who Superman is. And then Perry White, he brings Clark Kent in. Clark Kent is like, I have a new person here that wants to work here. This is Clark Kent. And then Lois Lane and Clark Kent, they embrace each other because they know what they're doing. It's like, and then boom, end credits. And then that Hans Zimmer music comes up. I just love that music. Hans Zimmer, I swear, he's one of my favorite composers. And anything he puts his hands to, I just instantly fall in love with it. Yes, even the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but just but the Man of Steel theme is one of my favorite pieces of original film score I have ever heard in the past 5 years. In the end, I absolutely love Man of Steel more than I did back then when I saw it for the first time in theaters. I love this movie more and more, and it was a great start up for the DC Cinematic Universe. Even though definitively it is Batman v Superman, that's going to be the true start of the DC Cinematic Universe, but this is like the prelude to what we can expect next. Though I do feel like this is a flawed movie, but it's still a great movie. Like, this is a very controversial film, and some people loved it, some people hated it, people really took offense to this. But again, this is not your grandfather's Superman. This is this generation's Superman, and the Superman that needs to work for this DC Cinematic Universe. And you gotta admit, despite its flaws, it was still a relatively good movie. Like, how I feel about Man of Steel is how most people feel about Star Wars The Force Awakens. Because, you know, how people are talking about how Star Wars The Force Awakens is like Star Wars A New Hope, and it follows some of the same beats as that movie. Well, I'd say, like, that's fine because, you also gotta think. There are some fans out there that was butthurt over the prequels, so they wanted to make a movie that familiarizes people with the original movies. In fact, one of the guys that works with the Nostalgia Critic, when they did their Star Wars Force Awakens review, to quote him a little bit,
"It's the reintroduction of an old friend who's taken a beating and just needed to show that he's gonna be okay before he accomplishes better things."
And that's how I personally feel about Man of Steel. This movie, it was just the return of an old friend who has taken multiple beatings and just needed to show that he's going to be okay before they move on to bigger and better things. And that credit goes to Zack Snyder because he has some tough shoes to fill, and in general at the time, because if there was ever time for a movie to be good, it was Man of Steel. And I'd say they did a pretty solid job and it worked. And hopefully with Batman v Superman, they took notes as to what worked and what didn't work, and they applied it to these next coming movies featuring Superman. And as well as what to do with the next coming DC Cinematic Universe movie. Now, at the time when this movie came out, I gave that movie an A+ for full price. Now, I don't use that rating system no more, but I still stand by that rating for this movie. But if we're going to count my new rating system, I'd say I'm going to give Man of Steel 4 stars for worth buying. And that's it for my spoiler review of Man of Steel. And now I'm ready for Batman v Superman, and I just cannot wait. That's it for today. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more, check out my channel. The link is in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Movie Pilot, and Periscope. Peace.